Hello everybody, welcome back to American Textbook Reading. We're going over Lesson 4 today, Types of Animals. Types, many different types of animals. As you can see in this picture, there are lots of different types or kinds of animals. Some animals are big, some animals are small. Some animals move in a strange way, right? Some animals run, some animals walk, some animals crawl. So there are many different types of animals. In this lesson, you will discover animal groups. That means we can talk about each group of animal as being different or distinct, different from each other in some way. So we're going to look at six different types of animal groups. We can group animals into 6 different groups. Let's take a look. Let's start with the first group here. Now this group is probably maybe your favorite group. It's my favorite group because we, human beings, are part of this type, a part of this group. And this group is mammal. Okay, so what is a mammal? A mammal is an animal with hair that gives birth to live babies. Okay, well, these two panda bears, I don't think neither one of them is a baby, but a mammal has 2 distinctive characteristics. One, it has hair. That's the first characteristic. The second characteristic, gives birth to live babies. What does it mean, live babies? In other words, when a mammal gives birth, the baby is alive. It's moving. It's not like an egg. When an animal gives birth to an egg, the animal isn't, moving yet, right? It has to break out of the shell. So it's not really a live baby. Mammals give birth to live babies. The baby is moving right away after birth. So those are the 2 characteristics or 2 unique features of mammals. Okay? And we can see many different types of mammals. Okay, what's the second group? The second group is reptile. Reptile. And this is an example of a reptile, a kind of ugly but also a little bit scary example of a reptile. What is this? Looks like an alligator or a crocodile, right? So how do we describe reptiles? How are they different from mammals? Here we have a reptile is an animal that lives on land. It lives on land. It can go in the water as this alligator does, but it lives on land normally, and it has dry skin. If you think of most reptiles, well, this guy just took a bath, right? He's just coming out of the water, so his skin is wet right now. But if you look at most reptiles, like lizards or snakes, their skin is dry, okay? So they live on land and they have dry skin. Let's look at a video of a typical reptile. Do you know what type or what animal this is? If you guessed iguana, right? It is an iguana. This is an iguana, right? It's a fairly large lizard, right, as lizards go. Let's take a look at it as it's moving around here. Okay, he's kind of an interesting fellow. He's kind of a little bit active, but you can see the way he's moving around. By the way, another interesting thing about reptiles is that they are cold-blooded. It means cold-blooded means that they cannot regulate their own temperature. They are cold-blooded. Mammals are warm-blooded. It means mammals, we generate our own heat from our bodies. But reptiles cannot generate their own heat. They need a lot of sunlight. And look, he's on the rocks here, these white rocks. These white rocks are giving off heat. So he's probably seeking warmth in the sunlight. Reptiles need that heat to warm their bodies. Okay, if they don't have it, then they can get in trouble. Okay, so that's another difference between mammals and reptiles. Okay, let's move on. Sometimes we can see another type of animal. You might think, hey, that looks like a reptile, but it's not a reptile. It's an amphibian. Amphibian. Remember, PH sounds like F. Amphibian. Amphibian. So, an amphibian is any animal that can live both. That's the important point. Both on land and in water. So a frog can live on the land, no problem, but it can also live in the water, no problem. It's amphibian. It can do both things. Amphibians have smooth, wet skin. Before we saw the picture of the reptile and of course the iguana, the picture of the alligator and then the iguana, if you touched the alligator's skin or the iguana's skin, you'd find it's rough. It's not smooth, and it's dry. Especially the iguana would have dry skin. And it would be hard to do this. You have to be careful. It wouldn't feel very good. It's very rough and a little difficult on your fingers. A little maybe hurt your fingers a little bit. But if you pet a frog, and it's kind of slimy, right? But it has smooth skin and it's wet. So that's a good difference. Amphibians are wet, reptiles are dry. You could think of that in that way. But anyway, this is an amphibian. Let's take a look at a video of a frog. This is a little frog here. He's sitting in the grass and he looks like he's just hanging out. Doesn't look too interesting. Oh, what's going on? Whoa, 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 whoa. Wow. That's pretty cool. That frog just jumped up, okay? So frogs, of course, that they jump up like that. They've got the big, long legs, but they're amphibians. Kind of a neat frog, right? Yeah, I hope he's not on my head, is he? Okay. Okay, well, let's move on to the next slide. Okay. Also, we can group animals as birds. Birds are a group of their own because birds, if you think about it, they're unique, right? What is a bird? A bird has feathers, right? It has many feathers. We can see the feathers here. And 2 wings, 2 wings. Most birds can fly. That's another key point right there. Most. It doesn't mean all. It means most. Of course, when we think about birds, we think, oh, they can fly. But not all birds can fly. Think about in Africa. There's a really big bird that can't fly. It's called an ostrich, right? An ostrich. An ostrich is a bird, but it can't fly. It can run, but it can't fly. So most birds can fly. Not all birds can fly. So these are birds. But all birds have feathers. All birds have wings. Okay? So those are the unique characteristics of birds. Okay. What's next? Insects. Insects are very, very, very common in the animal kingdom. We may not think much about insects. We may not think, insects are very great animals, but there are actually a lot of insects. Insects are probably, and the different species of insects are probably more than other types of animals. Insects are probably the most common type of animal in the earth. But we don't think about them because they're so small, right? But what are insects? An insect, this is a good picture of an insect. This is a stag beetle, right? Very impressive looking creature. But remember, he's not that big. He's a small guy. An insect is a small creature with 3 body parts. It has 3 body parts and 6 legs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 legs. Insects have no bones. There are no bones inside of an insect. The insect gets its strength for its body in its shell. Insect shells, insect bodies are hard, shell-like structures. So insects don't have bones on the inside like mammals or birds or reptiles do, or even amphibians. Okay, so this is an example of a stag beetle. All right, let's take a look. Here's another type of beetle here, and he's crawling along a leaf. You can see his head, you can see the middle section, you can see the abdomen, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 legs. He's kind of having a hard time crawling over this leaf, but that's a good example of an insect. Insects have 3 body parts and 6 legs. That's how you know it's an insect. Okay, so bye-bye beetle. Okay. Okay, so another large group of animals, fish, right? Fish, of course, live under the water. And again, we don't really encounter fish too often because we don't live in water. But if we go swimming at the coast or if we go diving, snorkeling, we can see fish under the water. And they're very colorful, very interesting creatures. What is a fish? How do we describe fish? A fish is a creature that lives in the water. It breathes through its gills. You can see the gills right here, this opening on the side of the head right here. There's oxygen in the water, but we can't get that oxygen because we don't have gills. But a fish has gills, so it can push that water through and take out the oxygen, and that's how a fish breathes underwater. If you take a fish out of water, can't breathe because gills don't work in air. Okay? So, fish use fins and a tail to swim. So the tail here and the fins, they use that to swim through the water. Okay? So, next, let's take a look at a unique part of certain fish and also reptiles on their skin. You know, different types of animals will have different characteristics to them. One interesting characteristic is a scale. What is a scale? A scale is a section of the skin on a fish or reptile. You can see this pattern. This pattern is very close up. We're looking very closely at the skin of a fish or a reptile. Their skin looks like this. It's in scales, and these scales sometimes will flake off, right? We have smooth skin. We cannot see scales on our skin. Only fish or reptiles. So fish or reptiles only have scales, this type of skin. Very interesting. It protects them, and it's a different style. It's a different type of skin or covering for the animal. When we talk about animals, we can talk about their young, right? The young of animals, okay? So as we see here, we have mama sheep, right? And we have two baby sheep, right? Lambs. This would be one baby sheep. We could say young. So actually both of them are young. Young is non-count. We say the young of a sheep, the young of a horse. So young is the babies of animals, right? So when we say young, we're talking about the babies of animals. Okay. Now before we talked a little bit about insects. When we talked about insects, we said insects have no bones. Insects do not have bones. Now we're talking about bones. A bone. What is a bone? This is a very strange looking bird, isn't it? Actually, it's an illustration. It's an artist's drawing of the inside of a bird. Normally we don't see this, right? But if you could take away the skin and the organs, this is what you're left with. You're left with the skeleton, the hard, bony structure inside an animal that supports the body, right? If you didn't have the skeleton, right, there's no support. It would just, fall apart. There's nothing to be able to move around, right? So a bone is that's the most important thing of a bone, is that it's hard, white part that makes up the frame of the body. So the bones make up the frame of the body, and they support the organs and the skin and everything else that the animal needs to survive. So the bones make up the frame of the body, okay? And not just for birds, but also for us and mammals and many other types of animals, okay? So this is the bone. Bones are very important, okay? Also, it's good for you to drink milk to help your bones, right? You need a lot of calcium because that's what bones need to grow. And you can find you can find calcium in milk. So drink a lot of milk. It will help your bones. Okay. Now, some animals, remember we talked before about mammals? Mammals give birth to live young, but not all animals give birth to live young. I gave the example of eggs. Here we have a couple of eggs. This one is the normal egg that you might eat this one for breakfast. This one is a strange egg, looks a little bit different. And is it broken? I hope not. What's going on here? It looks like it's cracked, right? Probably the baby inside this egg is cracking the inside. It wants to come out, okay? So this is a different style of birth. Mammals don't lay eggs. But what is an egg? How can we describe an egg? An egg is a round shell, usually round, maybe not perfectly round, but roundish. It's a round shell where a baby bird or reptile grows. So it's not just birds, it's also reptiles. Reptiles also lay eggs, and they will come out. Fish also lay eggs too, by the way. So birds or reptiles will lay an egg, and the young the young bird or the young reptile will grow inside that egg, and then after a while they'll crack and they'll come out of the egg. Okay? Okay, moving on here, we have a nice chart. This chart is about animals and their characteristics. I talked before about characteristics or features of animals. Different types of animals have different characteristics or different features. So over here we have the type of animal. Remember, we were talking about 6 different types of animals. We have 3 of them here, and we have a picture showing an example, and just an example, not all of them, but just one example from each group or each category. And then over here we have a description or characteristic that belongs to that group. So, for example, we have mammals, and we have a picture, an example of a mammal. This is actually, don't be confused by this picture, it's actually 2 polar bears. You only see the head of one, but this is the back of another one. Looks like they might be giving each other a bear hug, or one is giving the other a bear hug. But this is 1 polar bear, that's 2 polar bears. So yeah, it's a kind of an interesting picture. But this is a polar bear, polar bears. What is their characteristic? Hair or fur. So we can see that mammals have a lot of hair. They have fur on their bodies. They give birth to live babies. So when they have a baby, the baby is not in an egg. It's moving around already. It's ready to start crawling around, sometimes even to start walking around, depending on the animal. Okay, so that's a mammal. This is the characteristic of the mammal. Let's move on to bird. And then we have an example of a couple of ducks. These are ducks. They are birds. What is unique about birds? What are their characteristics? Birds have 2 legs, 1, 2. They have 2 wings, 1, 2. And they have feathers on their bodies. So if you describe an animal that has 2 legs, 2 wings, and has feathers on their bodies, you're talking about a bird. Okay? Let's move on to the next one. Amphibian. 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 Do you remember the unique characteristics about an amphibian? What makes an amphibian different, for example, from a reptile? Well, an amphibian has smooth and wet skin. So the skin of an amphibian, like a frog here, is smooth and wet. Actually, it's kind of, you touch it, maybe it feels a little slimy, right? But it's wet and smooth. It enables them, allows them, lets them, permits them to live on land and in water. So amphibians can live both on land and in water. Fish are not amphibians. Fish cannot live on land. Fish can only live in water. But amphibians can do both. They can live on land. They can also live in the water. Okay. Let's move on to the next 3 types of animals that we talked about, that we discussed. Here we have a reptile. We see an example. Looks like a lizard here. I don't know, is that a gecko, a type of lizard? I'm not sure what type of lizard that is, but it's an interesting, very fierce looking character, isn't it? It's a nice lizard there. What is the unique characteristic of reptiles? Reptiles have dry skin covered with scales. Remember, we saw that close-up picture of what a scale is, right? It's kind of a pattern on the skin. That's what the reptiles have for their skin. So dry skin covered with scales is a reptile. What about fish? Fish also have scales. We can see that. It seems a little bit short here, but we can also remember fish live underwater and have scales for skin. So fish live underwater. They can breathe underwater, and they have scales on their skin. Okay, the last group here, of course, is insect. What is the unique characteristics of insects? Insects have 3 body parts, right? The head, the thorax, and the abdomen. 3 body parts. So we have the head, we have the thorax, and we have the abdomen here. 6 legs, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can't see the other 2. Maybe it's kind of hard, but you know this ant has 6 legs. And it has a hard shell for its body. No bones on the inside. It has a hard shell instead that provides the frame for the body. So insect is 3 body parts, 6 legs, and a hard shell. Let's take a look at a video of an ant moving around. Let's take a look at him. We can see the 3 parts very easily. 1, 2, and 3 parts of the body, separate parts, and we can see the legs. This ant is very curious about what's inside of this leaf. I don't know what's inside that leaf, but it looks like there might be some food in there that ant is trying to get to. But of course, this ant is a small creature, like we said before. It's a very typical type of insect. And he seems to be very, very busy trying to get at whatever's in that leaf. But again, like I said before, insects have 3 body parts and 6 legs. They also have this hard shell around their body. Okay, let's go over some exercises to review what these words mean. Here we have several words. We have 6 different words. We need to use these words to fill in the blanks. These are the definitions of each word. So let's read the definition for each word and then match which word goes with each definition. Okay? Number 1, an animal that has smooth, wet skin and can live in water and on land. So remember, it can live both in water and on land. It can live in both environments. That's a pretty useful or very, very useful trait or characteristic to have, to live both on water or on land and in water. Do you remember what it is? If you chose amphibian, then you would be correct. Amphibians can live in water and on land. They also have smooth, wet skin. Move on to number 2. An animal that has 3 body parts and 6 legs. We just saw a video of this type of animal. What type of animal is it? Of course, it's an insect. It's an insect. Just remember that. 3 body parts, 6 legs. Okay. Down here we have number 3. Let's move on. An animal that lives in the water and has scales on its body. An animal that lives in the water. It can breathe in the water. And it also has scales on its body for skin. It doesn't really have a smooth skin. It has a scale. It has scales for the skin. What is it? It's a fish, right? Fish. We eat fish, of course. Fish is very good for you as a food. But these are animals that live in the water and have scales on their body. Let's move on to the next 3. Number 4. Number 4 is an animal that has dry skin and lays eggs. Remember we talked about 2 types of animals that lay eggs, birds and, did you catch it? Reptiles, right? We know this is a reptile, not a bird. Yes, they both lay eggs, but dry skin has to do with reptile, not with a bird, right? A bird has feathers on its skin, right? It doesn't really have that dry, scaly skin. Also, remember, reptiles have scales on their skin also. Okay? Number 5, an animal that has feathers and wings. Well, and it also lays eggs, by the way, of course. So that was the other one we were talking about. That, of course, is a bird, right? A bird is an animal that has feathers and wings. That's pretty obvious, right? By the way, it also lays eggs. Birds also lay eggs. Okay, finally, we have number 6, an animal with hair on its body. So which of these animals have hair on their bodies? Of course, mammals. We are mammals. Bears are mammals. Dogs are mammals. Kittens are mammals. They all have hair on their bodies, so they are mammals. And the other, do you remember the other point about a mammal? A mammal gives birth to live young. The young can start moving around right away. Okay. We have a good chart here. Now we've looked at a lot of different types of animals. Let's do a short little quiz here, right? We have 2 different types of animals here. Let's figure out what group they belong to, right? First of all, we have whales. This is a picture of a killer whale, right? Orca, right? Very magnificent, very beautiful animal. Lives in the water. It lives underwater, right? It doesn't really breathe underwater, though. That's a special thing about whales. They do have to come up and breathe the air at the surface. So, are whales fish? No. Whales are mammals. Why are whales mammals? Because whales give birth to live babies. When a whale gives birth, the baby is alive already. And also, whales do not breathe underwater. And they don't have scales on their skin. So whales are actually mammals. You want to see a video of a whale? Let's take a look. Okay, here we have a video of a mama whale and her young baby whale. Very impressive, isn't it? Very amazing. What happened, of course, is Mama whale is probably given birth to the baby whale here. The baby whale is probably not very old, and Mama will take care of that baby whale until that baby whale is big enough to live on its own. That's another thing about mammals. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So, what about spiders? That was our second one, right? That was our second picture, spiders. What about spiders? A lot of people think, you know, spiders are small creatures. They have a lot of legs. They have 3 parts to the body. But are they insects? No, spiders are not insects. Do you know why? Because, yeah, sure, they might have different parts of the body, right? But they don't have 6 legs. How many legs do they have? 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they have these little arms here. 5, 6, 7, 8. They have 8 legs. These 2 legs aren't really legs. They're kind of like fangs. They reach out and they grab prey. Spiders. Do you like spiders? They're kind of scary, aren't they? Okay, but they're small. Don't worry. They won't get you. Okay, so they have 8 legs. So spiders are not insects. Do you want to see a picture of a... I'm a little worried about watching a video of a spider. They're kind of scary. But let's see. Ah! That looks okay, right? Kind of looks out of focus. Maybe there's a tree in the background. Wait a minute. What's going... Oh. Whoa. Okay, here comes a spider. How many legs? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 legs on that spider. Whew. That's a big spider, isn't it? Okay, he's gone. Okay, let's move on. Okay, now here we have a little test for you, right? Okay, so we have 3 different pictures of animals, okay? What kinds of animals are they? Let's take a look at the pictures. What do we got here? Well, looks like we got a little lizard here. What can we say about that lizard? Looks like he's in a dry environment. He's on land, right? If we took a look at his skin really closely, we would find scales, right? So what can we say? What kind of animal is this? But knowing those things about it, it has dry, scaly, rough skin, right? It lives on land. We would have to say that that is a reptile, right? So a lizard is a reptile. Wow, very impressive. Look at this. This is really cool. This is a whale. We talked about whales already. The whale is coming out of the water here. What can we say about whales? Whales don't breathe underwater. They can't breathe underwater. They have to come up to the surface. Sometimes they play at the surface. They don't always come up to the surface like this. Really, the whale just has to come up to the surface for the top of his head to open the hole that he breathes through, and then he can breathe and he goes back down. And whales can hold their breath for a really long time. Okay, but this is a whale. They give birth. They give birth to live young. Okay. What can we say about whales? We can say that whales are mammals because they give birth to live young. They're not fish, they are mammals. Over here, we have our last picture here. Now, this is an interesting character. He's a very strong animal, right? Look at that leaf that he's carrying along with him. The leaf is much bigger than he is, right? So, what can we say about this creature right here? It has 6 legs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 legs. It has 3 parts of the body: head, middle, or thorax, and abdomen. And we can also say that that body is hard. It's a hard shell. This animal does not have bones. So what can we say about that? We can say that it is an insect. It has 3 body parts, 6 legs, and it has a hard body instead of bones. Okay. Okay, let's go over the true-false questions, okay? We have true or false, circle T for true, circle F for false. Our first sentence. Amphibians. Do you remember amphibians? Amphibians have dry skin covered with scales, right? Wrong. I hope you chose that this is false, right? Amphibians have smooth, wet skin, right? They don't have dry skin covered with scales. What has dry skin covered with scales? Reptiles. So if we changed it, if we said reptiles, that would be okay. Reptiles have dry skin covered with scales. That would be true. But no, the sentence says amphibians, so that's false. Amphibians don't have dry skin. They have smooth, wet skin. Okay, let's move on to number 2. Fish. Fish have scales, true, and fur. Have you seen a fish with fur? That would be really strange, right? Maybe that's what they mean by dogfish. No, I'm just kidding. Dogfish is not a type of fish with fur. Don't get me wrong. Dogfish is just a different species of fish. It's a type of fish. But anyway, I've never seen a fish with fur on it, and that would be really, really strange. Fish do not have fur, right? They don't have fur. If we just looked at this part of the sentence, that would be true. But because of this, it's false, right? Fish do not have fur. That would be very strange. 3. Insects have no bones. So inside the body of an insect, there are no bones. Is that true or false? What do you think? If you chose true, you'd be correct, right? Insects don't have bones. That's true. They have no bones. Instead, they have a hard shell on the outside. And that's what supports their body, gives them the framework. Okay, well, let's take a short break before we get into the reading. Okay, welcome back. Let's go over the reading for this lesson. Now, as usual, we usually take a look at the topic sentence of the reading, and that tells us what this reading passage is going to be about. In this case, there are many kinds of animals. That's the important part right here, many kinds. And that's what we're talking about in this lesson. Many different kinds or types of animals. So there are many kinds of animals. Some. When we talk about some, what are we talking about? We're talking, of course, about animals. Some animals. Some animals lay eggs, and some give birth to live young. So we have the two opposites here, right? Some give birth to eggs, right? Or some lay eggs. Some give birth to live young. The two differences, the two main differences. Some, again, some have smooth skin, and some have scales. So it's interesting. These sentences are constructed showing one type and the opposite type, right? So the next one, some have smooth skin, some have dry, scaly skin or have scales on their skin. Last sentence, again, same construction. Some live in the water and some live on land. Again, opposite. Some live in the water, some live on land. Okay, so it's very easily organized. These are these sentences are organized all the same way. And that's very good writing, by the way. They all follow the same pattern. And that's important. That's good. It helps us understand. Let's move on into the reading. We're going to talk about different types. So we talked about the different characteristics of different animals. You know, some live on land, some live in water. Now we're going to talk about the specific names of these different types of animals. A mammal is an animal with hair on its body. Okay? It gives birth to live young. So that's our first category. Remember, we're talking about 6 different categories. A reptile has dry skin and lays eggs. So that's the second one. And what are the characteristics of a reptile? It has dry skin, it lays eggs. It also has scales on the skin, but you know, those are 2 characteristics. Okay. Next category, fish. Fish. Where do fish live? They live in the water. What extra detail about the fish? Is there any extra details? Yes, they have scales on their bodies and they lay eggs also, just like reptiles. Okay. Amphibians have smooth, wet skin and most lay eggs. Not all, but most amphibians lay eggs. So these are details about amphibians. Okay. We have a couple more groups to go over. Bird. A bird is an animal with feathers on its body. Birds have wings. A bird has wings. Many animals have bones in their bodies. Okay? Now this is kind of a sentence that's kind of going off, talking about most animals. This part right here, of course, is just talking about birds. But starting from here, we say many animals. We get away from groups of animals. We're just making a general statement about most animals, or many animals, have bones in their bodies, because we were talking about bones before. Bones are hard and give an animal's body shape. We've got one more group of animals to talk about that don't have bones, and that's probably why we put bones in here, right? Because insects have 3 body parts, 6 legs. They do not have bones. Okay, so we put the information about bones before we put in insects, because insects are different from all other types of animals. They don't have bones. Instead, they have a hard shell on their body. Okay, so we have covered all of the different types of animals up to that point, and we finish up with a question: what kind of animals can you see every day? So think about it. In your everyday life, what kind of animals do you see every day? I'm sure you see mammals. Maybe you have a dog, or a cat at home, but I'm sure you see your other family members and they are mammals. So you definitely see mammals every day. If it's not winter, you probably see insects every day, right? Running around outside in your garden, perhaps you probably see insects. You probably see birds too. Reptiles, maybe, maybe not, depending on where you live and how cold it is, what the temperature is like. Fish, do you see fish every day? And I'm not talking about the fish on your dinner plate. I'm talking about fish in the water, right? So maybe you see fish in the water, but probably most of us don't see fish, unless we have an aquarium at home and we have pet fish at home. So think about that. What kinds of animals, or what kind of animals, what types of animals do you see every day? Yeah, it's interesting to think about that. Okay, let's move on to this skill. Now, we have our reading skill here, classify, and that was a good reading passage for this type of organization, because the topic sentence said there are many kinds of animals. Then it listed those different kinds of animals and gave us some details about each. So what we can do is we can classify, we can put the animals into different groups, and that's classifying. When you take a large group and you pick out individuals from that group and you put them into categories, that's called classifying, and that's what we're doing here. Animal groups. So over here, we have the different groups or the categories. This is how we classify animals. This is the name of the group. And these are the characteristics that are unique to that classification. Okay? So first, we have mammal. Mammal, give birth to live, beep. Okay, so we need A, and these are words that we need to choose from. Insect, young, scales, bird, wet. So what is the characteristic about mammals? Mammals give birth to live what? Insects? That would be crazy. Okay, mammals give birth to live young. Okay, I'm sure that's what we learned about mammals, right? We learned that's one of the characteristics about mammals, that they give birth to live young. Not to insects, not to scales, not to birds, and not to wet. Okay, young is the only one that really fits there, right? Now over here, the question is in the category. B, what is it? We don't know. We have to look at the characteristic, kind of like the definition, to figure out what is the category over here. Let's take a look. Feathers and wings. So we're looking for a type, a classification of animal that has feathers and wings. Which one? If you choose bird, of course you would be right. Birds have feathers and wings. Okay, let's look at the last category. Actually, the last category is very easy. It's already done for you. We have the classification reptile, and we have the characteristic about it, dry skin. So reptiles have dry skin. Okay, let's move on. We have the next three. Amphibian is the classification. We have smooth. What kind of skin? Smooth and what kind of skin? When we talked about amphibians, we said something special about their skin. So what's about their skin is special. Smooth, wet skin, right? It's smooth and wet. Those amphibians have smooth and wet skin. That makes them different, of course, from reptiles that have dry and rough skin, not smooth. Here we have fish. Fish have what on their bodies, right? What do fish have on their bodies that sets them apart? Insect, young, scales, bird, wet. Scales, of course, is the correct answer. We saw a close-up of that picture of the fish. They have scales on their bodies, okay? So that's the unique characteristic about fish. They have scales on their bodies. Now we have the last problem, E. We don't know what the group is, but we can see the characteristic or the definition. 3 body parts and 6 legs. You got it? If you chose insect, you would be correct, okay? Because insects have 3 body parts, 6 legs, okay? Remember, spiders are not insects. They have 8 legs. Okay, there's no spider. Okay, let's wrap up with some comprehension questions. We have, of course, these different sentences. We need to fill in the blank with the correct word, A, B, or C. Let's take a look at question number 1. Fish have scales, live in beep, and lay eggs. Okay, so actually we're talking about 3 different facts about fish, right? That's true. Fish have scales, yes. They lay eggs, yes. But where do they live? That's our question. Where do they live? They live in A, water, B, wet, or C, land. Well, right away we can see wet isn't correct because wet is an adjective. You live in a place, a noun. You don't live in a wet. That's really strange. Also, we can see the preposition is wrong. You live on land. You live on land. You don't live inland. You live on land. You live in water. And fish live in water. They don't live on land. So water would be the correct answer. Fish have scales, live in water, and lay eggs. That's the correct answer there. Let's move on to number 2. A mammal. A mammal is an animal that gives birth to A, live adults, B, live young, C, live eggs. That's an interesting. Live eggs. What is a live egg? It's an egg that hops around? Oh, that's crazy. So we can probably get rid of that right away. Okay? So a mammal is an animal that gives birth to live adults. It gives birth and it's already an adult? That's kind of silly too, isn't it? So really, our only answer, our only correct answer would be live young. A mammal is an animal. Sounds kind of interesting. A mammal is an animal. A mammal is an animal that gives birth to live young. Okay, and that's true. That's one of the characteristics of mammals. Okay, let's move on to the 3 and 4. Number 3, amphibians have smooth, wet skin, which, because of this word which here, we know that we need something that describes the skin, smooth, wet skin, and we need something else about that skin. Okay, so let's look at the answers. A, which enables them to live on land and in water. B, which most use to lay eggs in water. They use their skin to lay eggs in water? That sounds strange. How can you use your skin to lay eggs? C, means that they cannot live in water. Well, smooth, wet skin allows them to live in water. We learned that, so C isn't correct. A is our correct answer. Amphibians have smooth, wet skin, which enables them to live on land and in water. Okay, number 4. A spider. No spiders. Okay. A spider is not an insect. Why is a spider not an insect? We've talked about that a few times. A spider is not an insect because A, it does not have bones. Well, that's not true because insects don't have bones. So that's not the correct answer. I mean, just because a spider, it's true, a spider doesn't have bones, but insects also, they don't have bones either, do they? So that's not the correct answer. A spider is not an insect because it has 8 legs, not 6 legs. That's it right there, right? A spider has 8 legs. Insects have 6 legs. Spiders have 8 legs. So spiders are not insects. C, it has 6 legs, not 8 legs. No, that's not correct. They just switched the numbers around trying to confuse you, right? So B is the correct answer. Okay, spider is not an insect because remember, spiders have 8 legs. Right? They're kind of scary. Okay, anyway, let's do the final review, the final slide here. Let's talk about these different types of animals. We have lots of different types of animals here. We can talk about what group they are in. Remember, we were talking about 6 different groups. So we have 1 group, 2 group, 3rd group, 4th group, 5th group, and 6th group. What are these different groups? So if we would say this one looks like polar bears, what can we say about polar bears? We can say they have hair or fur on their bodies. They also give birth to live young. So we say they are mammals. Over here we have a frog. What can we say about the frog? What kind of skin does it have? It has wet, smooth skin. Where does a frog live? It lives on the land. It can also live in the water. So it is an amphibian. Okay? Over here we have 2 ducks. What can we say about ducks? They have 2 legs, 2 wings, and they have feathers on their body. So what does that make them? That makes them birds. Okay? So this is a bird. 2 birds. Okay. Over here we have a picture of a fish. What can we say about the fish? The fish lives in water. And interesting thing about fish, they have scales, right? They have scales on their bodies. Okay? Just like a reptile. Oh, this animal also has scales, but this has scales as well. We call this, of course, a fish. The fish live underwater. They have scales on their body. They are fish. And I already gave away the answer to this one, didn't I? But this, of course, is a lizard. A lizard is a type of reptile because it has dry, rough skin, it has scales, and it lives on land. Okay? Over here, what do we have here? We have an ant. Ants are very busy. Ants are very strong. What about the ant can we say about the ant? What can we say about the ant? Well, the ant has 3 body parts: the head, the thorax, the abdomen. 3 body parts. It has 6 legs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, of course, this is an insect. Okay, so that wraps up our 6 animal groups. So, when we talk about animals, we can classify them into different groups. What group does that animal belong to? That's called classification. And it's a very interesting, very exciting to look at different animals and think about what group they are in and what unique characteristics make them part of that group. Okay, well, I hope you've learned a lot. I've learned a little bit in this lesson. Hope you have too. And watch out for those spiders, okay? Okay, I'm sorry. Spiders are good things to have around. They eat insects that you don't want, but they can be a little scary. But don't hurt the spiders. They can help you out. Anyway, take care, everybody. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.